Ladies and gentlemen, this is DVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and all welcome aboard the Eastern Express. On this episode, we're diving deep into Moldova, the tiny nation sandwiched between Romania and Ukraine that Russia sees less as a country and more as a geopolitical parking lot. Now, Moldova might seem harmless, but lately the country has been Russia's plan B, or technically it's plan M, considering how many other countries they've already interfered with. In last year's presidential elections, Moldova saw a bit of democracy a la Moscow. Vote buying, disinformation campaigns, illegal party financing, the full Kremlin buffet. And if you thought Russia would stop there, oh, sweet summer child, think again. So without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Moldova has expelled 3 Russian diplomats after accusing Moscow of helping a pro-Kremlin lawmaker flee the country to avoid a prison sentence. Alexander Nesterovsky, who was sentenced in absentia to 12 years in prison for illegally funding a pro-Russian political party, reportedly sought refuge in the Russian embassy in Chisinau before being smuggled to the Russian-backed breakaway region of Transnistria. Footage released by Moldova's security service appears to show Nesterovsky entering the embassy a day before his sentencing. Authorities allege he was later driven out of the capital in a diplomatic vehicle. The case marks the latest incident in worsening relations between Moldova's pro-European government and the Kremlin. President Sandu, who has pledged to secure Moldova's EU membership by 2030, has repeatedly accused Russia of seeking to destabilize the country. Moscow has denied the accusations, with Russian ambassador Oleg Ozerov describing them as unfounded and unsubstantiated. Russia's foreign ministry warned it would respond to the expulsions. Tensions have been further fueled by the arrest of Evgenia Gagauzia, the leader of Moldova's pro-Russian Gagauz minority, who was detained at Chisinau airport in connection with an ongoing criminal investigation.
Now let's zone in on the east-splaining portion of our show. Gagauzia, a little-known region in southern Moldova with a unique history and deep ties to Russia. As Moldova moves closer to the European Union, Gagauzia finds itself at the center of rising political tensions.
Gagauzia is a small, autonomous region in the south of Moldova, home to around 140,000 people. The Gagauz are a Turkic ethnic group, but unlike most Turkic peoples, they are predominantly Orthodox Christian, a legacy of centuries under the Russian Empire. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, tensions rose as Moldova declared independence. Gagauzia, fearing a drift towards Romania or the West, pushed for its own independence. A compromise was reached in 1994, granting Gagauzia autonomy within Moldova. This means it has its own legislature, executive, and even the right to self-determination if Moldova's status changes. Today, Gagauzia remains closely aligned with Russia, both politically and culturally. Many residents see Moscow as a protector, especially as Moldova's central government pursues EU membership and moves away from Russia's orbit. Recent tensions have flared over accusations of Russian interference in Moldova's politics, and Gagauzia often finds itself at the center of this east-west tug-of-war.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. I hear you asking through the screens, why is Russia interested in Moldova? It's small, not exactly wealthy, and most people outside of Eastern Europe forget it exists. Well, that's precisely why Russia wants it. Controlling Moldova gives Russia somewhat of a crowbar against Ukraine, specifically Odessa. If Moldova flips pro-Russian, Ukraine faces a nightmare scenario, having to defend a 900-kilometer border. And if Odessa falls, Ukraine loses its access to the Black Sea. Suddenly, Moldova is less a tiny country I always confuse with Romania, and more, holy crap, this could actually be bad. But here's the twist. Russia isn't planning a military invasion, mostly because Ukraine inconveniently stands in the way. Instead, they're doing the old-fashioned way, throwing money and spies at the problem. Moldova's recent history sounds like a plot of a bad spy thriller. Mysterious escapes involving embassy cars, corrupt politicians hiding out in Russian embassies, and cash-stuffed envelopes labeled totally legitimate campaign funds. Case in point, Alexander Nestorovsky, a Moldovan politician who thought the Russian embassy in Chisinau made a good Airbnb to dodge prison. He was caught taking money from Ilan Shor, a fugitive oligarch famous for masterminding Moldova's billion-dollar heist. Shor funded parties that pretend to be pro-European while secretly working for Moscow. He isn't just corrupt, he's actively undermining Moldovan democracy. And if that's not enough intrigue, Moldova's Gagauzia region recently saw its leader arrested at the airport, accused of funneling Russian rubles into local elections. Russia promptly condemned this because apparently arresting corrupt officials is only allowed if the officials aren't theirs. This whole operation isn't cheap. Moldova's prime minister estimates Russia spent about 200 million euros last year alone buying votes, making Moldovan democracy officially pricier than most of the Oscar-nominated movies this year. Now, Moldova's parliamentary election this fall will be critical. President Maia Sandu's pro-European PAS party is likely to win, but not by enough. The Kremlin knows openly pro-Russian parties won't win. Moldovans still favor Europe by about 60%. So they're betting on third-way candidates. It's the Georgian scenario 2.0, a supposedly pro-EU government secretly friendly with Moscow. You might remember Georgia tried this, and spoiler alert, it didn't end all too well. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Maria Haleti, member of the advisory board at International Diplomacy Initiative. Hello, ma'am, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, good afternoon.
All right, so we're looking at the situation in Moldova, and recently the accused Russian embassy of engineering the escape of a pro-Kremlin lawmaker to the breakaway region of Transnistria, just as he was about to get jailed over illegal political founding allegations. Can you tell us a little bit about that particular situation?
As I understand, Russia employ a lot of spies, and actually they use diplomats for different purposes, not only diplomatic one. Therefore, it is always a danger for any country, in particular for Moldova, which has a Transnistria which is bordering Moldova and which is also populated by Russian military forces. Therefore, for Russia, it's easy step to influence Moldovan politics, which is moving to European Union instead of being close with Russia. And also, it is a situation which is happening in many countries, also around, not only Moldova. Poland recently had the same situation, Finland and other countries. Moldova is under huge pressure because it's it's close to Ukraine, it's close to Transnistria, and at the same time it is moving to Europe.
Right, and speaking of influencing election, there's another individual that's been released and put on house arrest for electoral fraud charges. Do you think that these are kind of more separated incidents, or is this reflective of a larger phenomenon of Russian meddling in Moldova's elections?
I think it's a larger phenomenon. It's a phenomenon for many countries because Russia tried to interfere into different elections in different countries, and we can observe it in just recent elections in Romania or other countries. In Moldova, for Maia Sandu, it was also very difficult to win the elections because of Russian interference. But now Moldova also is expecting parliamentary elections. It's another problem that Russia, of course, is preparing to interfere into these elections. And if Maia Sandu face a non-supportive parliament, non-supportive government, for her it would be very difficult to run the country, and it would be very difficult in a very important moment to move country to the European Union. And therefore, she needs huge support among MPs and also among government. At the same time, for Russia understand this, and if anything happen, if it interfere into elections and allow more pro-Russian forces being elected, it means that my Sandu and also Moldova will face huge challenge, maybe being stopped or prevented from the European integration, despite all efforts done by current Moldovan government and also by the European community. Therefore, it is a challenge not only for Moldova, but also a challenge for Europe, and it's a challenge for Ukraine. Ukraine will not, I think it would be difficult to stand another pro-Russian allies on its border, and it will be more and more surrounded by pro-Russian allies. I mean, Belarus and also Moldova.
Right, like you mentioned, just due to the geographical location as well, Moldova is actually very important for the survival of Ukraine. Something also I'm curious about, we bring up the EU aspiration in Moldova. The breakaway region of Gagauzia recently have voted 95% against joining the European Union. Why do people there lean so towards Russia despite support from the EU and the war in Ukraine still taking place?
In Moldova, many people unfortunately support a better relationship with Russia, and we can see it in Gagauzia, we can see it in Transnistria, we can see it even in other cities of Moldova. Actually, Moldovan diaspora in European Union are more proactive in pushing country to the European Union instead of people living in Moldova. I believe that it is partially because of influence, Russian influence. People mostly in Moldova, they speak both Romanian and Russian. A lot of people in Moldova, they also follow Russian media and follow Russian narratives. And because of the close connection of Moldova with Russia for many years, it was a part of Soviet Union. Later, it was connected with Russia. Plus, Russian politicians who influence people's mind brought Moldova to the situation that many people don't understand the value of European Union. At the same time, they lived for a long time with Russia. They have some understanding of Russia, and because of they listen Russian media, they also are under influence. And even I remember I was in Moldova a year ago, and I talked to people about war in Ukraine. Many people said, "Look, it is okay, the war will be over and you will again communicate with Russians as nothing happened." You know, they don't understand sometimes why Ukraine is fighting against Russia, why Ukraine is fighting for its own sovereignty and democracy. And it is a problem of a media landscape. It's a problem also of education of people. Sometimes people need to go more often abroad to see how people live in democratic countries, to understand for what they are fighting, for what they need to have a good and developed country and better life. And unfortunately, economic conditions in Moldova is not as good as in many European countries, and therefore they do not value the European Union. They believe that the European Union doesn't support enough them.
Right, and for the general audience, can you help us understand how does Gagauzia differ from Transnistria, which is a more widely known place for the Western audience?
Yeah, unfortunately, Transnistria is also like a region which is not recognized and also populated with Russian military forces. It's also very pro-Russian. At the same time, this region was heavily dependent on Russian gas. Recently, Russia cut the supply of gas to Transnistria, and Moldova shall support Transnistria in resolving this crisis. And Moldova, together with Ukraine and European Union, work hard somehow to support people during the winter time, because basically people were in the situation when they can be frozen without energy supply. It is a problem that this region is kind of cut. You know, it has not a connection with the world instead of except Moldova and Ukraine, and basically only two countries can handle this issue. At the same time, they still don't have a big trust in Moldova. They don't want to be a part of Moldova, and they don't want to build joint politics together. Even when we discussed European integration, of course, Moldova is moving to the European Union, but Transnistria hesitating about it. And of course, Moldova believed that one day Transnistria, seeing developed Moldova, would also consider this. But now Transnistria still rely on Russia as a partner.
Mm-hmm. All right, so it does seem like President Maya Sandu has work cut out for her, seeing that there's so many differing voices when it comes to the relationship with Russia, and a part of energy infrastructure is still largely dependent on it. How is she going to push forward with their EU aspiration and the prosperity of the country with so many different factors coming into this?
I believe that European integration is something what countries should decide, and it's good that Maya Sandu decided that Moldova shall be a part of European Union. And also, the supporters of Maya Sandu, they believe that Moldova shall move forward with the European Union. It is good that young people, despite they reside in other countries, they still support the progress of Moldova as a part of European Union. I believe that Maya Sandu will be able to continue reforms which are necessary for the country to join European Union. And I see the huge support from the European Union on this way. And it's very important because a country like Moldova could not do everything by itself. Of course, a lot of reforms required financial support. European Union also helped Moldova, and it's also support to Maya Sandu with energy supply, and it means that and infrastructure, and it means that after the projects, infrastructure and energy projects completed, people have access to all necessary things. I believe it will be a demonstration of for Moldovan people that integration to the European Union is something what is bring benefits to people rather than negative element, and it will build better trust people in integration, in EU integration, and it will increase support of Moldovan people in European integration.
All right. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on Eastern Express. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Amid energy insecurity, France and Germany are considering resuming Russian gas imports, at least according to Reuters. European leaders and energy executives cite urgent industrial needs and limited alternatives as key reasons for the potential shift.
As the war in Ukraine continues, European energy strategy faces a harsh reality check. With US supplies insufficient and negotiations with Qatar stalled, companies like France's Engie and Germany's chemical giants argue that some level of Russian gas is necessary to stabilize energy prices and protect jobs. Executive Vice President of Engie recently said that if there was a reasonable peace in Ukraine, there could be a reduced but significant role for Russian imports. German industry voices are growing louder too. Leaders at Luna Chemical Park warn that soaring energy costs threaten their survival. Total Energy's CEO cautioned against over-reliance on US gas, calling for a diversified approach. Despite past sanctions, dwindling Gazprom exports and Ukraine's refusal to extend transit agreements beyond 2024, Europe's energy pragmatism appears to be steering it back, cautiously, towards Moscow supplies, at least according to Reuters.
Georgia's ruling party and opposition have firmly rejected restoring diplomatic ties with Russia unless Moscow returns the breakaway regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Despite Russia's recent overtures, Georgian leaders insist that sovereignty over these territories is non-negotiable.
Considered pro-Russian, the ruling Georgian Dream Party has taken actions that make this label not entirely accurate. Namely, both the Georgian government and opposition rejected restoration of diplomatic ties with Moscow, citing issues concerning the breakaway regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The dispute traces back to the 2008 war, after which Russia recognized Abkhazia and South Ossetia as independent states and stationed troops there, effectively controlling about 20% of Georgia's territory. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Galuzin signaled Moscow's willingness to restore relations if Georgia drops its claims to the breakaway regions. His comments, echoed by Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, were swiftly dismissed in Tbilisi.
Russia's push to reverse its demographic decline is faltering, as new data shows the country's birth rate has plunged to its lowest in centuries. Despite state incentives and policies promoting larger families, the population continues to shrink at an alarming pace.
According to Russian statistics energy Rosstat, the country recorded just under 200,000 births in the first 2 months of 2025, a 3% drop from the previous year. February alone saw an even steeper decline of 7.6%, with some regions like Smolensk and Kostroma reporting drops of over 20%. Rosstat estimates that the first quarter of 2025 will mark the lowest birth figures since the early 1800s. While deaths have also declined slightly, the gap remains stark. In January and February alone, Russia's natural population fell by nearly 119,000 people. Some regions saw death-to-birth ratios as high as 3-to-1. Long-term forecasts paint a grim picture, with births projected to fall further to 1.14 million by 2027, and Russia's population potentially shrinking to 130 million by 2046, numbers not seen since the era of the Russian Empire.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.